Hey everyone, and welcome to another segment or another installment of drywall taping. Today we're just going to be observing corner bead and just pretty much what's the purpose or what's the objective here. The objective realistically is just to fill a gap that exists between the corner bead and the drywall. The corner bead does have a little bevel on the edge, very noticeable, and just like the wall or just like a factory edge, the idea here is to fill the gap. Most people say why three coats? Why go over it three times? And the purpose of it is that the material shrinks. And because the material shrinks, to give a nice complete finish, you have to go over it three times, right? And on top of that, think about it. It is a gap that you're filling. So if a gap is to be filled, sometimes it takes more than one pass to get to that. What you're seeing here is, I guess, a manual version. There's ways to put it on the wall with the machine, but in this case, you're watching a manual version, and any of the two tools can work, right? There's no one specific tool. You're filling the gap, you're completely cleaning the edges, and you're making one clean pass after that. So you're not going over the 10-inch space. If you're using a 10-inch knife, you're not going beyond 10-inch. You're going just within that little parameter of 10-inch. You clean the edges off, and after you clean the edges, the idea here is to completely fill that gap with the knife. Use the knife to make a flat gap or a flat surface between that gap is what you're trying to do. Yeah, the objective is to fill that gap up, right? There's not really much to say about it, clean, flat, and smooth. That is always my suggestion and what to do. And realistically, because it's manual, and it's straightforward, there's nothing much to say. The more ripples you leave on the wall is the more ripples you have to sand. You're observing me do the work here, and I try to get a full span because I do not want to have a line in the mud, which is going to cause more sanding later, right? So that's something to take note of, especially in corner bead, is that you want to fill it, you want to have it flat, you want it even. But if it's possible to make your final sweep a complete sweep, that'd be ideal. You know what I mean? You don't want to do a half sweep, a half sweep, a half sweep. And the reason why is because the characteristics of your hand movement, you're touching the mud, all those characteristics are going to be on the mud. So the idea here is to make one big sweep. I'm used to it. I'm not going to say I'm an expert, but I'm used to it. So my sweeps are very big. They're about 12 inches long, as you can see here. They're about 12 inches long. And in this case, there's a long corner bead, and I have a different approach because on the wall, I can do one from the top, one from the bottom, and I have a character line in the middle. But with a long wall like this, you're going to realize that you need to make about 5 or 6 character line, right? Unless you're wearing the stills, unless you're on a scaffold, that's very possible. But here's a nice example of how to approach this long space, right? The first line I did was from one side, right? And then the second wipe that I'm doing right now is from the opposite side because I'm trying to lead into the already existing mud. I don't want to step into the mud that I just put on the wall, right? And this position is good for me. So positions does matter. What position you pull your knife from, it does matter, right? Positions are good. This is how I like it. Now, the character line that is going to come from this, I'm hoping to minimize it, number one. Number two, I'm hoping to hide it within the original existing mud that's on the wall. And again, that hand position, is really what you're aiming for. Be generous with the mud. The consistency of the mud in this case should be like a bit tighter. It shouldn't be smooth and soggy. It should be tight. It should be, not straight out of the box, but like one container of water. Do not dilute it too much. And yeah, these things do take more than one pass. So what I'm trying to do in this pass is fill it up as much as possible. Give it its heaviest coat that I can possibly do. And the reason why I approach it like that is because when you do it as heavy as possible, most of the drying is done. So your next two pass or your skim coat or whatever, you know, it'll be way, way lighter and way faster to dry, right? Um, and what else would I say is there to consider? There's nothing much else to consider, right? There's another way to do this process is to use a smaller portion and build up. That's a different way, and we'll go over it. But for now, you're practicing with a 10-inch knife, and the idea here is to fill the gap and just have an even, flat, consistent mud on the wall. You don't want to touch it too much. You don't want to put more characteristics in it. You don't want to take off too much of the mud. You know, you fill it, you're confident that it's filled, you take off the edges, and then you wipe it flat as you can, and hope you did a good job. That's it. In this scenario, what you're looking at here is a smaller space, and I'm using, I think, a 6-inch knife for this. It could be a 6-inch or a 4-inch, but smaller spaces like this that require a smaller knife, just do it. Treat it almost like it's a corner, and go directly into the corner, and also use the corner as a guide to help you follow through with filling that gap, right? I'm not close enough for you to see the actual gap, but I'm sure I'll get a shot and put that into another video. But this is a smaller knife, and it's a smaller space, but it's still a corner bead. Well, I mean, there's nothing much to see here. Usually, if you have a longer scaffold, you could just, walk one complete walk. If you have a scaffolding setup, you can walk a complete walk. But in this case, I'm using a ladder. So the idea here is that I'm doing like a good 18 inches space and then moving on to the next 18 inches space. These are all just demonstrations to show how it can be done with or without all the complete tools. Because if I had a stilts and I was doing this, I'd be much faster, right? I'm on a stilts, I'm walking, it would be faster. But in this case, this is just a matter of like, well, not everybody has a stilts nor a scaffold, but you have a space you want to do, right? So a ladder is a great option. And, this is about, say, for example, a 30-foot span. Maybe more than 30 foot, actually. Maybe about, say, 50-foot span, 40, 30-foot span. It's a 30-foot span, I think. And it's not necessarily easy to do something like this. It could be intimidating, but it's just one small chunk at a time. You're going to have character line. You're going to have to sand this area here and be very careful. And that's pretty much it. I've got some more at the end that shows what the final product should look like, right? Because you're going to see an example of it at the end of rough sanding. And it should be flat. It should be filled out completely, and there should be no missing spots. You're aiming. Another aim to do that I use as a technique sometimes is put the blade flat across the mud, or flat as possible, and run it across the blade of the corner bead, because that's the flattest point in your tool, is the actual edge itself. So if you put that edge completely edge to the corner and just walk it out, yes, it might get a bit messy, but it's a great example of what a flat surface would look like, right? So you can practice it, get an idea, and good luck. Just move on from there.